Okay, what is going on? This is Lack of Lepers, also known as SCP Thank you so much for joining on this, our weekly show. The podcast version of this is available on Apple Podcasts as well as on Spotify, and the name of that is Confic Call-In. Want to thank everybody for joining. We are dual casting partially in the Discord, which there will be a link to in the show notes, and we're also, for the first time ever, live on Twitch. So getting used to this. This is a lot of fun and very happy to be doing this. Hopefully everything goes well. So today is really the start of a new season. We've done about 2 seasons worth of shows so far, about 20 episodes in. And I do encourage you to go look at those, like I said, on the actual recorded podcast called Confic Call-In. This is going to be a little different branding, SCP Meta. I think this will speak to hopefully some more people who can get in here. And then also, this has the added benefit of having a more frictionless entry system. So you don't necessarily have to be in our Discord server, which is political suicide to some. So this way, anyone can interact, of course, anonymously as well, including trolls who have the capacity to raid. So we will see if that happens. Hopefully not, but we'll deal with it. So just want to welcome everybody once again. We are changing things up a little bit. I do want to mention first off that we do have a phone number if you would like to prioritize your comment. And if you got the chutzpah, you can call the number that you see on the screen just here. This is 316 444 3115. That number is live while we are for about an hour. Once again, every Saturday from 11 Central. That's right. For about an hour or so. And then, of course, you can always call that number and leave a message. We'll be more than happy to take a peek at that and get back to you once we're finally on the air. Just a few more housekeeping notes. This Twitch channel will have a couple of different shows. One show that I'm pretty excited about is going to be a reading series. So I know a lot of people who try to follow the SCP Wiki particularly have a difficult time keeping up with the quantity of articles that just inundate the site. It's very difficult to catch up. And so we're going to do a show weekly where I'll go through and I'll read, and I will not be able to keep my mouth shut. So we'll try to catch up with all the articles that come out so that we are just on the bleeding edge of SCP content. We'll do that for other sites as well. So, for example, we'll do that for RPC and anything else, SCP Commune, although that hasn't really been active since late last year. Still waiting on a new article there. And if anyone has any recommendations, obviously you can leave those. We'll take a look at those as well. Other things like backrooms or liminal archives, those are all in the meta of SCP that counts. So with that being said, we will start the way we usually do nowadays, which is just with local news. So in the LLC News, which is the magazine, we have a new article up this week. I was very excited about this one. This one is written by an individual named SariaStuff, and this individual comes to us from the Backrooms Wiki, has a good amount of expertise, it turns out, on just how far the community has come in, the about year that it has been around. And it's very, very interesting to see the categorization and the analysis of all these different eras that the backrooms have gone through, despite only being a year old. Very, very decorated history, a lot of nuance, a lot of very interesting analytics going on in this article. So I would encourage you to read that. There are some pretty hot takes on there. So if you haven't checked that out, then do. And just while we're talking about that, Backrooms seems to continuously be exploding. If we take a look here on the screen, and let me get this sharing on the screen here. I don't want you to show those tips again, please. Okay, so we are in the Discord server where we hang out. This is the SCF. And if you take a peek at the back rooms, they are up to 5,714 members in their Discord. Huge. This is doing numbers. And they got about 1,500 online at any given moment, which is crazy. Now, SCP, they have officially released their Discord, an official Discord. And so this is kind of a rollout process. So you can't read too much into that, I think, but it does have about 1,000 members. It's got good engagement, about a third of that online at a given time. That's a little better than Backrooms up here. But anyway, that's pretty neat. And it's interesting to see Backrooms explode. There's actually 2 weeks in a row where our magazine article is about Backrooms. So very, very happy to be in on that niche and be in a position really to welcome commentary on that. Hopefully we've set ourselves up very well to do that. Okay. And then in other news, we added something to the Confic Magazine website, which I think is pretty cool. I kind of wish I had done this a month earlier when so many contests were going on. We're talking about the Department Con at SCP. Backrooms had a What If contest. But this is an events calendar on our webpage now. It's just under the More tab. And then you can see a nice big calendar for the month and then any contests that are going on. This is just a nice way to visualize that. I know how difficult it can be going to the actual wiki, looking at the details, trying to figure out when it started, when it ends, and things like this. So hopefully this gives everybody a nice, concise picture of what contests are going on at any given moment in the space. So check that out. On that note, currently we are still in a contest with the RPC. This is called Broader Horizons. I've got the screen shared, of course, just up here. And it looks as though all entries are in. So we've got, call it 6 or 7 of these. They're all vying for a particular spot, which I think is RPC. Is it 619? I don't know. Anyway, the prize is a spot. I'm not sure which one it is. But the voting for this is going to end, I think it's tomorrow. Yeah, the 10th. So almost done with that. Check out these entries if you haven't. Haven't had a chance to read these myself, but I will for sure. We may even do a special stream to check these out. Okay. And then there's also a contest going on at the Liminal Archives. This is the horror contest. The water. Horror contest 2022. Only 2 entries at this moment. Obviously, it's brand new. It goes on well into next month. And just by the same author, actually. 2 entries by the same author. So I'm sure that'll populate with time. Now, moving on from our local news, we'll get into a news section that we're very happy to do on a weekly basis now, and that is going to be our recommendations of the week. So we're going to split this up. Once again, every week I'm going to be reading all the SCPs that come out that week. I'm not going to cover all of them, obviously. We'll get as far as we can into what we can, but just in an attempt to bring you along and kind of walk together through the new articles that the wiki has to offer, see what's going on. So that'll be that. And in the spirit of that, I have read what has come out of the SCP in the last week and selected a recommendation for those. And this week's recommendation offering from the SCP is SCP-6870. This was written this past week, and it's just very, very interesting. The rating, I think, is probably a little lower than it should be, but it's got this very, very elegant, incredibly clean and beautiful header, sort of like an ACS replacement. I think this is what ACS should have probably done, maybe what it wants to be when it grows up, because this is just so good looking. It's so clean. You've got these nice icons you can see in the video if you're watching. Classifications, object of interest, signal. It has hover over sort of footnote pop style pop-ups here. Just really, really interesting stuff going on in this header. It's a little borked on mobile at the moment, so hopefully that'll be fixed. I think this is from a different branch. If we go to Wikidot, this is the S7APCS classification system, and this looks like it's actually on the actual SCP Wiki. I don't know how long this has been here. Let's check it out and who did this. This looks like it's been, so it's actually from the Russian branch. Don't cancel this. Don't cancel culture this, okay? Just because they're from Russia. But it looks like the individual who at least posted this is a user by the name of Lance Radioactive, and the note is translation of Russian bits. So I don't know if that means it's actually from the Russian branch or not, but I do think that I read somewhere that it is from a different international branch. And just to bring that out as a larger theme, it seems as though the branches have some interesting directions that are later sort of adopted and really subsumed and consumed by the English branch. So I want to thank, this is Pasta Rasta, longtime author for the SCP Wiki. I want to thank both Valid Clay, I'm quoting, and the people who worked on and made the English translation for the S7 APCS classification system. So that's pretty cool to see. Now, the actual article, I think, I'm not going to give it away. I want you to go read it, obviously. But this is a real tight article. It's very concise. It's very succinct. It's easy to read. It has this really wonderful, wonderful vibe. And it has something to do, I don't think this gives anything away. It has something to do with the Department of Abnormality. And so it really carries that just like intensely creepy vibe, that just very unsettling sort of background radiation going on this whole entire time in the article. It's very well written. I think the clinical tone is spot on. It's not flamboyant. It's not florid. It really is a very tight article, very well composed article. And it achieves quite a lot in the very short amount of text here. So this is the recommendation for the week, SCP-6870. That'll be in the show notes. So check that out. And then moving on, we will also be doing this for, like I said, other sites. So in that spirit, we have our recommendation of the week for RPC. Now, in the case of RPC, there's actually only one article that was posted this week, which, makes my job easy for sure. But it happens to be a good one, and I'll tell you why. This article isn't the best when it comes to the actual composition. The clinical tone really falters in a few places. There are a couple of sentences that essentially are just repetitions of previously given information. But this is just a really cool, really cool article. It has to do with a deer, kinda, and it takes sort of the deer in the headlights, idiom, and kind of flips it a little bit in a very interesting way. So I think despite its tonal flaws, I think that could be polished a little more. I think the concept behind this is really lasting. I think it's very clever, and it's sitting at about 4.5, call it 4.6 out of 5 stars. So I think that's a pretty decent rating for this, all things considered. Okay, great. Yeah, can you hear me? Please say you can hear me. Oh, yeah. No. Son of a gun. Testing. Son of a bitch. 1 second. Technical difficulty. I'm the only one here, so I got no one to apologize to. Son of a bitch. Holy hell, I hate when it does that.
I can hear you.
Okay. Could you hear me the whole time, or are you just now hearing me?
I just joined.
Okay, great. Well, let's hope that worked the whole time. Well, we are now joined. Thank you so much for coming in by the one, the only, Almarduk of
Thank
RPC
you.
and Liminal Archives notoriety. How are you doing today?
Very well. Tired, but I'm always tired.
You're a hard worker.
Not so much. It's just that I go to sleep too late and I wake up too early.
Such is the life of a night owl artist. Speaking of which, I believe you released an article on the RPC. Excuse me, goodness gracious, what a blasphemy! On the RPC recently. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about that? I remember seeing that in a draft phase and was very excited to see it on the main list. I think it's done pretty well.
It's not mine. It's a collab with Prototype Toaster, this semi-famous author. It's mostly his work. It's all old internet stuff. It's the very specific aesthetic that conspiracy forums used to have in the 2010s.
Mm. Yeah, kind of. Forgive me if I haven't seen this close enough to make this apt comparison, but it sounds kind of like what SCP was trying to do with that Parawatch canon.
Yes, it's that kind of thing, but not centered in one specific site, more of an internet-wide phenomenon.
Mm. Well, drop the number for that. We can put that in the show notes as well.
Oh, it doesn't have a number.
Oh,
Because it's a contest entry. I'll link it here. 1 second.
great. Yes. We were just mentioning that the contest is over, I think, tomorrow. Voting, I think, stops tomorrow.
Yes.
And this one's doing pretty well. Okay, here it is. So the spot is 470. That's what everyone is competing for. Okay, I actually haven't read this one yet.
3-2-1, but
Oh. Okay. I haven't read this one yet. I was actually referencing your brain cheese article. But
oh yeah, that one.
that one too. See, you work too hard. There's too much going on. We can't even keep track of which article it is that we're talking about that you wrote. But no, this I'm gonna have to read this. I haven't read the entries in this contest yet because this week I've tried to start something I'm going to do, which is just try to catch up with SCPs, and then when a contest comes along, try to catch up with those. It's quite a tall order, but definitely we'll be doing just a stream about these articles as well.
I've read, I think, almost all of them, and there's this strange common theme that I've noticed that they seem they fall just short of what they promise, and I'm not sure why that is. There's some kind of a small flaw in one of them.
Now,
they don't deliver what's promised in the description.
You mean the description of the prompt? Of the writing prompt? Yeah. Yeah.
For example, one of them is about this species of butterfly that lives off of magic, and the general idea of the article is that these moths are weaponized into a laser. And you think of that prompt, and it's fucking cool. It's incredible stupid, but it's a cool kind of stupid. But you get to the article, and it doesn't deliver on that level of cool. I'm not sure why.
Well, that's interesting to note. I'll have to keep that in mind when I'm reading this. But yeah, that sounds like an excellent start, at least.
Yeah, it's an idea that writes itself.
Yeah. And so just to pick you up, we were actually just talking about RPC. I'm doing something called the recommendation of the week. We did one for SCP, and we did one for RPC, which was a little easier because given the last week, really there was only one article that was written, I think. That was not part of the contest, at least. And this one is RPC 343. Have you read this one yet?
I have. I credited it.
Ah, that's right.
Such a hard word to pronounce.
Yeah, I remember seeing your name there too. Yeah, I was just recommending it as, of course, the pick of the week for RPC, given that we'll get to the contest entries later. And I thought there were some issues with the tonal quality to it, but on the whole, I thought it was really interesting. Not only the picture which they do a very good job with. But I think it takes this sort of idea of like a deer in the headlights and sort of, puts it on his head.
I think the idea is the kind of thing you wish you would have thought about first, because it's very clever, it's very simple, it's very easy to understand. But it just kind of stops there, in my opinion. That's part of why I criticized it. I felt that the idea is very scary, but it's a normal deer. It's just a deer. And the idea of an animal that sees you immediately when you make visual contact is very terrifying, but when it's just a normal deer, it's not quite as scary as it could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. That was certainly an unsettling part of that RPC. I think that my big problem, I think there was a logistical problem, a logic problem actually, which is the worst kind because otherwise you could just toss it up to stylistic difference. But I think there's really sort of a logically contradictory thing in here, which was that around the time it was captured, the discovery section, earlier in the containment procedures or protocols, basically they say that you have to be somewhat blindfolded to avoid this anomalous effect, as you've described, of this deer sort of, reacting to knowing that it's being observed. And yet there really was no mention of that around the discovery. It talked about some mutilated bodies that have appeared to have been trampled by a large deer, but it basically, in my opinion, glosses over what should be a more complex issue of how exactly did they catch this thing when they hadn't had a chance to study it yet to understand that they needed to wear something like a blindfold.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why they would need that. It doesn't have any particularly dangerous effects. Like, it's a normal animal, just sedated or something like that.
Yeah, it'll get you. So it is a good read. I would obviously recommend it. It is the pick of the week. Not perfect, but I think the rating it has is, approximate. I think it's pretty good. And definitely give that a check out if you have not yet. And so what we'll do is finish up our local news, just what's going on in the space. And then I'll open the floor, see if Almarduk has anything to bring to the table as far as topics are concerned. So just something that I found that I thought was a little interesting, that I kind of peeked my head into. SCP on Twitter is a war zone that's on fire, and I don't recommend it for anybody. I consistently say that you should get off of it if you're on it. However, if you've made it somewhat of your prerogative, something that you've signed up for, in this case, something like a job, not really. You have to go in. So let me do that for you, and then I'll report on it. You shouldn't be there. It's just a terrible place to be. It's a lot like a daycare. If you're employed at a daycare, you come in, you got to, because it's what you signed up for. And, you look around at what's happening and you're just like, oh my God. No. So, but anyway, we'll get to some of that hopefully. But I did want to bring this out, something a little more benign that I think is pretty interesting. So I don't know if anyone is aware of the individual by the name of Jack Rabbit or Agent Jack Rabbit. Really started on the Twitter sphere and then slowly made her way into the actual wiki, I think with an article or two now. But she is a cosplayer initially and then has branched out. She was initially co-hosting on a podcast for the SCP Wiki called Simply Creative People, and episode 1 featured her. Great episode. I highly encourage that episode. The other episodes, I think are a little hit or miss, but that first one is excellent. And she has really blossomed into really an entrepreneur of this space, which I respect. And this is one example of that. So apparently there's a new show that is starting. And this is really what she left that initial podcast for. But the show is called SCP Sideshow. On the screen here, you can see their Twitter. And I had to go check this out because they're posted on a publishing platform called Otherworlds TV. Now, Otherworlds TV, if you go to their Twitter, is a television station that is exclusive to Roku, which is that thing you plug into your TV. And last night, I have a Roku, so last night I found it, I downloaded it, and I gave it a watch. And it's literally TV. So they decide the programming, kind of, flashback to the 2000 something, where you can't actually select, you can't on demand it. You have to watch what's being broadcast. So I didn't get to watch the SCP show. Still can't comment on it. I don't really know what it is. What I watched last night was basically, if you've ever seen Mystery Science Theater 3000, it was kind of a movie like that from the 1970s without the commentary, without the actual characters. So, it was okay, but a very
such a strange way to broadcast something.
Yeah. And it's kind of cool. Like I said, I respect it. I think it's kind of cool. But yeah, it's real lo-fi. You can tell it's real independent, low budget kind of stuff. But I think it does a really, really good job of actually capturing its own name. So when you watch it, it really gives this otherworldly feel, and it's a little disturbing. Just once again, sort of this background radiation of unsettled feelings. So I think it captures the vibe it's going for well. And honestly, I think an SCP show is a pretty good fit there.
Are the episodes available elsewhere, or is it just the service?
Not yet. They will have a YouTube channel, they say. So we'll look for that. Obviously, that'll be something that I look at that we'll talk about here. But haven't been able to catch it. I have no idea what time it comes on. But yeah, should be an interesting thing, and we'll let you know what we think. Next note on the local news is that Affray Studios, which is a publishing studio, really of video content, has done a couple of SCP projects in the past, short videos for YouTube, fan movies, essentially, if I'm not mistaken. They've started a new one, and this one is called SCP Pandemic. And recently on their Twitter, they announced something that I thought was very interesting, which is that they're going to be paying certain authors from the SCP Wiki a lot of money. And so this is a tweet from their Twitter page. It says, Affray Studios will be pledging a portion of our earnings from SCP Pandemic to SCP Wiki creators. We're not talking about chump change here. We're talking thousands of dollars over the coming month to several different writers and creators, especially ones that we use content from actively.
My God.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty cool because I've long been a vocal proponent of the maturity of the genre. I think it says a lot about the maturity of a genre when you get paid for your work, right? People who are doing this, who are earning money doing it, people who are doing this who, are trying to be entrepreneurial in the actual writing. More power to you. So I think this is just great. I definitely think they deserve it. It's a huge payback for a group of people who do things for free. I mean, they have their own incentives. Let's not be naive about that. They have their own currency that they regard probably more than something like the dollar. But I still think it's just such a nice gesture because most of the time people in this sort of second tier category of content creation and production don't really give the authors enough credit. They essentially just capitalize on the work that the authors have done.
It reminds me of a conversation that I've had with James and I've played a few years back. They talked to me about how they're just kind of poor, and they talked to me about how mad they were that certain East Side show was making money off of one of the articles, which was named Imago. I don't remember the number, and they were getting like nothing off of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I mean that's you can't complain. I think honestly because you know what you're signing up for. even if you were deaf to that, something like what happened with the death of the author in 2021, which is the events, the community event that happened with the town halls about pixelated harmonies articles, and them not being her property, really. So I mean, I think you don't have any excuse whatsoever. I think that it's up to the individuals who make content from the works on the SCP Wiki to do something like this, which is why I think it's really great.
But it's kind of shitty when you think about it. Like, they're making money off of your work and not even thinking to share it with you.
Oh, sure.
Like,
sure.
I'm not saying it's legal or just kind of shit in a way that isn't technically unfair.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's sliding by, the slimy legalese of the situation to avoid what should be a more moral approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we've seen that happen once again. Just harkening back to what happened with Harmony's articles, that was a similarly slimy hugging of the legal terms in order to avoid the moral one. But that's another story for another time. But so back to this, they will be paying. I mean, this is a huge team. They've done a lot of good work. And so the next question is, who's going to get paid thousands of dollars? Well, as it stands,
And what for?
Yeah, I guess. Well, I'll tell you, this SCP pandemic is based off of SCP 5000. So yeah, it's I think it's a game. It may be a game, and it's based off of SCP 5000, the story, which we might be familiar with. And so at least that author, who is Tanhoney, longtime SCP author, sounds like he might be getting a nice paycheck for writing SCP 5000 when it comes to this game. There's a couple other ones too. I think SCP 93 is going to be in this, but the problem with very mainstream sort of content production in the terms of like really the high medias, games, films, expensive fan films, they will typically 99% of the time focus on series 1. So it's a nice gesture to reach out to the writers and creators that they're going to use the content of, but good luck trying to get in touch with somebody from series 1. That might not work out well.
Yeah, I thought this was about 005 instead of 5000. Well, wait, no. 005 is the skeleton plague, right? And 008 is the zombie plague? Since it's just a zombie game, at least as of right now.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I wondered how they were going to pay the author.
I don't know. Someone asked them that question. They said they're going to try to contact them through Wikidot, and then someone had to remind them that Wikidot was not really a reliable way to do that. And so they'll try to reach out and see what social media they have. And then someone like Tanhoney, I think they'll be able to find them. Another SCP that was mentioned as a potential future. A lot of the SCPs they're looking at haven't been added yet. They may be added in the future. So whether or not this actually comes through, with any more SCPs is a different question. But 49 was mentioned as well, which is the plague doctor. So I think that is interesting because we all know that was rewritten by DJ Cactus along with Gabriel Jade. And Gabriel Jade, of course, has been banned in probably the most shameful way that you can be banned for some highly illegal activity with an individual who is not of age in the community. And so it would be strange, I think, and probably a bad idea, just in my opinion, to pay thousands of dollars to really honestly a child groomer, allegedly, because they wrote 49. So as much as I hate to say it, I think I'd rather see all that money go to DJ Cactus.
Well, lesser evil,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. I want to welcome and thank James Bond for showing up too. Appreciate that. If you have any questions, obviously you know what to do. You're here, just throw it up. So that's really it for local news. I kind of wanted to give y'all the floor, see if you had any topics, any questions, anything happening in the space that you think is interesting that you'd like to pop up. There we go. I had the wrong window up the whole time. Okay. All right. Well, moving on then. Let's take a little bit of a trip back to last week. Okay. So last week really was once again the conclusion of the season. We have a new season today. So I kind of want to do the old TV show thing and recap last time on Dragon Ball Z kind of stuff. So last time we talked about April Fools. That was April 2nd. And so April Fools had been 1 day old at that point. And it just seems as though the events that occurred on April 1st last week, these things are still rippling. Their ripples have ripples, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. And a lot of interesting things has happened in that week. So I kind of want to go back and visit this. This is an image that I prepared on the screen for this occasion that I think captures sort of the vibe.
I missed the entire event, but I heard that Cyber Squid and IHP, which are not very famous, but they're very influential staff members, I heard that they quit, and I thought that was the April Fool's joke.
Yeah.
And it turned out no, was the consequence of the April Fool's joke.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
what the fuck happened?
Yeah, so we'll look into that. That's a great question. I mean, the more you look at this thing, the more that is the appropriate question. It's like, oh my gosh, are these guys being meta? Is this like a really elaborate pataphysical exercise? Is this the joke? Is the joke what happened? Like the drama. So yeah, last week we kind of covered just the wholesome, the surface level stuff, the humorous modifications that really all the Confic communities made. You know, SCP's fish team takeover, RPC did the Octoritus archives, Backrooms did the tofu recipes, and we didn't mention it, but Liminal Archives did something funny through their Discord announcements, where they gracefully failed back into the fold of Backrooms and changed all of their server titles to reflect that. That was pretty good. But
They were all pretty funny, surprisingly.
Yeah, that was well done. I think Vizlox did that, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, so there's a whole nother layer to April Fools on the SCP Wiki. The SCP was the only one that had just a tremendous amount of like terrible drama that happened. So we're going to go through that just a little bit because, like I said, we did touch on that last week a little bit, but so much has happened. And if you missed that episode, I am going to shout this out. This was last week, April Fool's Day in Confic. It was me, it was James Bond, it was Harmony. I recommend that you check that out as well if you haven't. That was a pretty good one. But so let's just review. Let's just take a minute and just look.
Oh no, that is a terrifying image.
Yeah, we're not even there yet. We're not
the
even
broken
there.
accessibility code,
Yeah.
the adult content. Oh my
I've got
God.
SCP-6969J on the screen for those who are listening to just the podcast afterwards. But we're gonna get to that. So let's zoom in, starting with sort of a high level image here. So April Fool's Day was the day on SCP Wiki was the day of the J. Of the joke article. Only one article posted on April 1st that survived was not a J article. There were 6 surviving J articles in total. And if you look at the procession of when they were posted, they were not interrupted. So 6 J articles in a row that remained on the site. That only non-J article, which was SCP-6247, was no coincidence part of the Fish Rising, the Fish Team April Fool's Day joke. And it still has the CSS theme to this day. And was also by no coincidence written by an author by the name of Fish-ish. So we have one article that wasn't a J, and that article was kind of a J because it certainly took the April Fool's theme and ran with it. The first comment on this article reads, "It begins," and this was posted just after midnight on April 1st. So it kind of gives us some insight into the behind-the-scenes meta-narrative placement of the article, something of a coordinated effort between not only the staff members on the SCP Wiki, but some of the authors as well. And so this sort of kickstarted this April Fool's fish theme. And every successful config article posted to the SCP Wiki that day was either a joke or had something integral to do with the joke's theme, this fish team. So depending on where you stand, this is either highly embarrassing or it's just an excellent job for celebrating the community holiday.
Both.
Yeah, maybe it's both. That's a good point. Before we get into the articles, I'll take a look at each of them here. Jane Bond says, I don't know if anyone has talking about this before, but Google Chrome have tried to turn one of a dying config community to be a group of interest in the RPC Authority. And this is an anomalous reaction core. Looks like there's a link here for Allure, the ARC hub. And if I recall correctly, Jane Bond continues, there is a forum thread created by Google Chrome about proposing ARC as a potential GOI, but I can't find the forum thread. Google Chrome is a author for RPC who I think was, Alma, just correct me on this, I think you know more about it than I do, but was active a while ago and then has left and now is back trying to apparently promote this group of interest.
Oh no, Jane Bond is talking about 2019 events, I think, or maybe 2020. That site he's linking is a thing that existed in 2019, and there was a certain attempt to organize RPC's lore, like remake it, which didn't work out very well, but a lot of those resources have found some kind of place on the site nowadays.
I see.
The thing is, a lot of those efforts were taking old sites or discarded ideas for old sites and turning them into groups of interest, which doesn't have the best history because it's a different thing when you construct an organization to antagonize a certain fiction and when you write it to be a secondary character. So a lot of these ideas turned out to be kind of planned in the end. ARC is one of these examples because it's just kind of a mess of ideas that it took from a lot of other small sites because it's a splinter of a splinter, mess of backroom ideas. Not in backroom sense, backstage. That's
I see. Yeah, something that we kind of see with other communities as well. I know that there were offshoots that SCP tried to incorporate into themselves, and sometimes it's a seamless transition. I think other times just the nature of what was initially carved out to be something independent, prevents it from being really integrated very well. But yeah, it looks as though Google Chrome hasn't been active on the RPC for a while, so this is from quite a while ago. It looks like the last time they were around is, February 2022, so not too long ago, but I wouldn't say returned. His last comment was, or their last comment, excuse me, was the 5th of April, 2021, so it's been a while. But no, I didn't know that, so Jane Bond, thank you, and Alma, thank you for your report on that. Did not know it. All right, so let's take a little peek, as we were afraid that we might, into a couple of these J's that were posted onto the SCP Wiki. This one's by Yossi Posse. If you don't know, SCP-6969 was a 6,000 contest entry, and it was basically about, copulation, some kind of twist on that anomaly. So this is a joke about Yossi's article. So it's a self-referential joke. Yes, it does have the adult content warning again. So, and we see go ahead. Thought you were about to say something. My bad.
Oh, no, I was just laughing.
Oh, okay. So basically in this article, I'll try to summarize this for you so you don't have to read it. But, you've got the cessation of a project that's called Anti-Fuck. Okay, so Project Anti-Fuck. And what results from the cessation of Project Antifuck is a end of sex scenario, with things like a thaumaturgical interpolator termination string, which is abbreviated as TITS, and so on and so forth. So this is really a riff on Yasi Posse's own highly adult-themed 6K entry for April Fools. And the article, in my opinion, without getting too much into my own thoughts, I mean, it was kind of smirk worthy. It wasn't really my style, honestly. But the thing that I can't figure out about it, there's one point that I want to mention. There's an attempt in the article to pataphysically neutralize the anomaly by designating its file as a J with a -J. That fails, which is a hilarious jab, in my opinion, at the trend of mainless articles fully deserving a J but not getting them. I don't think that was an intended commentary, but I think it's pretty funny that it didn't work, because there's not a lot of distinction between a J and a main list these days on the SCP Wiki.
Yeah, one could say the original 6969 is pretty much a J.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just a ton of justification for a very unfunny punchline, which is the joke is sex, but like taken seriously as in a joke from the universe or a joke from God in that sense.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that. We actually have an article about this on the Confic Wiki that I'll jump ahead to real quick. But this is the LOL-Foundation. So there's a Neo-lolFoundation, which is really the sort of era that we are in some ways on the SCP Wiki. And of course, we just added a joke section that tries to pronounce, what these things have in common. So I'll just read this. This is what we came up with. It's still sort of in some stages of processing, but Neo-lolFoundation joke articles and tales are typically short, simple, crude, have minimal effort, particularly of writing, do not feature prominent connections to the SCP Foundation context, are of an anti-humor style, and or are highly mimetic. This style of joke article became prominent in 2001 and 2021, 2022. And then we might even reference the low quality joke article forum post that was created in this recent month that basically said this: I am very disappointed in everyone, myself most of all. I've become what I swore to destroy. Why did I do this? To quote myself, I just don't think let's see what smallest possible amount of effort is a valid genre of comedy. Well, now we know. So,
well, we knew the floor of effort in
yes.
a few years ago. I think 2017. It's 309J.
Yeah, 309J, exactly.
Which, funnily enough, this is topical. I think, not sure, because there's a lot of people who share that same kind of name. But the author of 309J, called Better, might be the author of J about the Great Seal, which is something I assume we're going to talk about later,
yes,
because
we
it
are.
caused a lot of people to quit the wiki.
Yep. As you said, Cyber Squid and IHP left. And it's really, really odd. It's really strange, because the article is really just, and we'll get into it, but the article is really just a satire about the Cerastes event, the Cerastes incident, which is something that I particularly harp on again and again and again, because it really is, I think, besides 2018 Pride controversy and maybe the death of the author back in 2021, aside from those two things and maybe next to them, so the Cerastes incident is probably the most important and catastrophic thing that has happened internally to the community, I think, in probably, well, the history of the wiki. It's a remarkably its effects are still here, like as we see with the Great Seal J that Alma is referencing. Directly comes from the Cerastes incident. So we'll get to that in a second, but just to so suffice it to say, the shadow of the Cerastes incident is very large, and it's still looming over really the entirety of the wiki. And so much so, we see people so sensitive that people like Cerastes, people like Cyber Squid, people like IHP quit basically because someone made the joke. So that's interesting. But to go back to jokes, yes, SCP-309J. That's actually not the author. The author who did the Great Seal is Plague PJP, and the author of 309J was something else to do with fishing, as it were, as luck would have it. But yeah, so actually, this is interesting. This may be a point of contention that we can talk about. But according to this Containment Fiction Wiki article, that actually contrasts older jokes like 309J with this new trend. The examples that's given for Neo-lolFoundation J's are things like the Cot J, which is basically just a picture of a cat, the Squid J, which is basically just a textural picture of a squid, SCP-6000J, which is, as you might remember, the entirety of the Great Gatsby, just with basically Control F on Windows and Microsoft Word and replacing the Great Gatsby with SCP-6000J. And then other things like you see here, the SCP Wiki discussion page simulator, which I don't know if you've seen, is basically just a meme. Once again, it's a lot like the cat where you just kind of post that onto the wiki. So the point being is that these new styles of jokes, these Neo-lolFoundation jokes, can be contrasted from past J's. And so let me read this paragraph. And Alma, I'm just curious about what you think, because this does mention SCP-309J. And so this is how it reads as it stands currently. A joke article can be categorized as Neo-lolFoundation if it is simple, features writing minimally or not at all, has little to no relevancy to the context of the in-universe SCP Foundation, yada, 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 everything we just said. While low-effort jokes have always existed, Neo-lolFoundation joke articles are differentiable in that the past efforts generally featured a more composed and substantive framing that underlied or overarched the context of the simplicity. So, for example, we can look back at the very famous SCP-J, which was written by Scantron or Communism Will Win. This is one of the highest rated on the site. It has over 4,000 upvotes.
Procrastination stuff.
Yes, it's the procrastination rock, right? And so the question would be, okay, so if a Neo-lolFoundation joke is just simple, it doesn't really feature talent at writing, it doesn't really have any context, requires minimal time, it's sort of mimetic, is this SCP-J, wouldn't that be categorized as a Neo-lolFoundation article? And this goes into the details, so I'm curious as to what you think of this argument. SCP-J can be considered short, simple, crude, with minimal writing effort, yet it does so in the context of procrastination as humorous framing, and so has a second, more reinforced layer of conceptual effort.
Something humorous, I think, that's come from this, that you know how CP prides itself a lot on departing from its 4chan roots. This kind of humor is 4chan humor. It's exactly what they would do.
That's a good point.
This is like sort of thing you would see posted in thread about anything and completely derail it.
Yeah.
Shift the conversation either in favor or against that kind of posting.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly right.
It's a death of discourse.
Yeah, well, it's death of more than that, because what you've described is so accurate. It's 100% correct, because really these things are mimetic, but they're mimetic for their own sake. The example of SCP Cot J is a great example. It's literally just a picture of the cat, and the greater context of it is cats and plus the internet, right? Which is something, like you said, would be seen on 4chan. So, the reason why we're trying to capture this as different from past joke attempts, for example, the SCP-309J, that's short, that's simple, that's crude, that has minimal effort. It's completely irrelevant to the in-universe considerations. It's anti-humor, and it is highly mimetic. But the reason why it's different is because it was unintentional. and derives its humor from this larger framing of being unintentional.
That's
Whereas,
actually incorrect. It was intentional.
exactly.
It tries to look unintentional, but it's intentional.
Oh, you mean
At least
309J
I
was
think the
intentional?
story-
Yeah. So if it was intentional, then yeah, it would certainly be a Neo-lolFoundation. I was of the impression that it wasn't intentional, and that's really the pivot point. Because if it isn't, then I totally agree. I think it should be a Neo-lolFoundation joke because it fits all the criteria. The point.
I think a more important criteria than intentionality or not. Neo-lolFoundation articles always have of defenders that show up immediately whenever you criticize it. When you say when you get angry about it, because there's 10 times plenty of reason to be angry, because articles like this just kind of ignore the standard for writing quality. People get on your back for taking things too seriously, or deflecting criticism, that sort of thing. That's the appearance of these groups are what signals me the start of this pseudo era and pseudo articles, because they're not really articles.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And that really
that same kind of defense for 309, for Cut J, etc.
Yes, that's a great point. And actually, I think that's what's trying to be communicated in this, which is a post that was to the forum of SCP Wiki just before April Fools, and this was directly inspired by Cut J. And the title of the thread is "Low Quality Joke Articles," and so the individual basically is saying what Alma is trying to say, which is, hey, what's up with these? Like, are we a writing site? Why are these popular? What is going on here? Essentially, this person, I think, is noticing that there are indications of sort of an emerging style that people are sort of trying to copy and put new examples out of. And just as you say, it's the individuals who participate in these low quality joke articles who come out of the woodwork, right? See here, to defend it. And we talked about this last week, so we won't go back into it again. But yeah, we see the same thing. It's the individuals who are sort of the beneficiaries of this, of maybe keeping it in the dark. Because once you give it a name, once you give it the name of a Neo-lolFoundation joke, there's something to that sort of maybe it doesn't want to be observed. Does that make sense?
There's every attempt to hide that there has been cultural shift, I think. So this sort of thing in 2016 doesn't exist. Go back to 2016 and you see forum post for this kind of article, and everyone is fucking slamming them. Sometime in 2017, I think, that sort of thing changes. Now there's memes, now there's jokes. It's kind of a transition towards a more social media approach rather than
exactly
literature.
Exactly. That's what we said last week, and we looked at, what was it? It was Cot J. We looked at the comments of it, and even people like Shaggy was dropping that phrase, social media site, because we said it before here, is that these are signatures of social media mentality. And you can try to euphemize that all you want by saying that, oh, well, that exists everywhere. That exists on Twitter, it exists on Facebook, it exists on 4chan. Yeah, but that's true. But the odd one out is, exactly. The odd one out is the SCP Wiki. This is supposed to be a writing site, So I mean, this is the last place. The fact that it has more in common with these other places is the point. You've just proved it by trying to euphemize it away as not being unique. Well, it should be more unique than these other things, particularly if you're writing. So, yeah, I think we see eye to eye on that, and that those are really good points. And we'll just see what happens with it. The most we can do is just document, for future reference.
I am kind of weird position about this because this happened again to me, that the discourse point that I've been echoing for a while suddenly starts to leak into the mainstream SCP discourse, and I feel, I wish I was wrong. I wish I wasn't right. I wish this was not a slippery slope, because a few years ago, when you talk about 309J being the end of SCP as literature, people would basically accuse you of relying on a slippery slope fallacy and blame you for that. But we are now in that later, and they're now further down the slippery slope, and yeah, there is a slippery slope. We're seeing it right now.
Yeah. I mean, people like to bash on the slippery slope argument, but really it comes down to it just being, macro evolution is just a series of steps of micro evolution. And so when you have individuals in the community, people like, I'm not saying that these people are responsible for what's happened, but these are just sort of figureheads, that we can point to as road signs, defining moments. People like DJ Cactus, people like Rounder House, who they make compromises explicitly with what the wiki is supposed to be in order to further basically an agenda that has everything to do with a social media mindset. And so when people see that, I mean, obviously it's going to be monkey see, monkey do. And so you have a new generation and preponderance of people who basically look at the rating module and say, okay, well, this is successful. This is good writing. This is what I should do. This is what is, popular on the SCP Wiki now. And so at some point that becomes really a runaway selective process where you have that reinforcement in that direction. And there's really no governance. There's no governor that pulls that back and counteracts that direction. And so I think that's what we're doing, is we're trying to remind people here. I mean, these things are going to fluctuate. The Neo-lolFoundation jokes aren't going to be around forever, hopefully. Just like the first round of Neo-lolFoundation, really peaked in, the early years of the SCP, kind of ebbs and flows. But, I think to that point, it's very necessary for people like us to have this conversation, because if you didn't have somebody coming out there and saying, hey, you're supposed to be a writing site, who would?
It's the only people that would come out to say that. Would only say that 5 years after the critical point of change, which was 9J. And only now there's people coming criticizing.
Yeah, unfortunately, it can take, when you have a community that really is hive-minded, I think, and sort of insular and abscessed to their own ideas, really to the point of xenophobia, I think that it can take a much, much longer time for, points like what you're saying to make their way into the community. But, I'll ask you this, something that I've observed is that I think this is sort of a silver lining. It's something to be a little hopeful about. And it's that, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, the whole entire wiki and the community around it was willfully ignorant of just how, addictive, how drug-like something like the rating module and upvote count can be. And I think that's somewhat changed. I do see signs in the community that really has become more mainstream, almost common knowledge, where people are giving it titles like upvote brain rot. And you have people like DJ Cactus who are turning a corner and saying that, upvotes really aren't that important. And, things like this, we never thought we'd hear him say. It seems as though it takes several years, but maybe these things will eventually make their way into the community.
I will not believe that until the account that SCP staff have set up to publish articles anonymously.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's called the community. So far, it has only been used once in the Harbinger 2 project. It's a gimmick. Because the authors of those articles were eventually discovered anyway. It was the point of the project. That account has no other uses by anyone else. You will not believe that there has been any several lining of or any cultural change until people start using it, start using that resource and really taking steps to counter this cultural shift in favor of social media numbers.
Right. Yeah, and there are very few people who are saying things against that style that the community can even hope to listen to. So, for example, they're certainly not listening to us. But you have someone like Dr. Gears, who was recently on an interview with Sean Saxum, the Creative Stuff podcast, which is a really great interview. And of course, he's saying the same things. You know, he did this a couple years ago when WhiteGuard interviewed him, and he came out and he actually said, you know, the majority of the problems that happen in the SCP Wiki community can be boiled down to ego and the rating module. And by that point, you know, only fringe individuals had been saying things like that. And suddenly you have Dr. Gears saying that, which is huge. It's an endorsement. It's vindication of all kinds, really, for a lot of us. But you know, even then, it was still a problem. I mean, they couldn't really listen to it. They heard him say it, and you know, now that he said it, there's actually a moment on Sean Saxum's interview where Dr. Gears explains this to Sean Saxum, and Sean Saxum goes, "Oh, now I get what you're saying," because Dr. Gears said it. You see, when the whole point was to remain ignorant of it. It's not that they didn't know that this was the case. It's just they tried to suppress that for as long as they could, because once again they could become beneficiaries to it. So it's just sad to see in some ways that even someone like Dr. Gears, who, you know, he's in a, you know, sort of weird kind of dual property state where he's this elevated figure, but he's kind of so far removed from the community that no one's actually listening to the advice and the wisdom that he has to give. But he wouldn't want to do it publicly, but I think he would agree with us.
I think he was in influential figure internally until he started to say that. Because, you know how people are seen as respected until they have like some kind of stupid talking point, just immediately lose everyone's respect for them.
Kind of like
Or in how investing something like
Morhadao.
He made it one bad investment and just lost everyone's respect for them.
Yeah. That reminds me of Morhadao. I think I'm saying his name wrong, but there was once again part of the.
I think it's right.
Yeah, part of the April Fools. I think I have it pulled up here. Part of the April Fools was that Morhadao, who's an ES author and really is pretty well known. I mean, he entered the 5K contest, for example, and the SCP Twitter actually, you know, promoted his work. I mean, he's not like an unknown person, but he did a little April Fool's thing. You know, was it a joke? Probably not. It was kind of an own of. It really ties into what we're talking about, because if you look at SCP-6969J, once again, this article for April Fools by Yossi, it's very clearly in the admonition hub style. And not only that, but we see that with a number of the J's that came out. Here's another one, which is 6269J, once again having to do with fish and the fishing team. This one also is clearly in the style of the admonition hub. And so what's confusing to me is, you know, particularly with someone like Yossi, who's not really involved, I can't make heads or tails to this. I can't figure out if they're trying to satirize it, if they're trying to kind of poke fun at it, or if they actually like it and are just mimicking it because, you know, once again, it's CSS wizardry that can help the rating. I'm not sure.
Well, SCP has this very strange relationship with this kind of like, I don't know if they call it a hit piece. I don't know what's the term for it. There's a weird relationship with it because people will make them, make articles very obviously taking a shit on this kind of thing, or on other sites, and later criticized, claim that it's completely on good faith. Everything is okay, don't worry. Everyone is internet. We're not making any grand statements here. It's just lighthearted fun. And how can anyone fucking buy this? Like, see someone in that same Twitter thread calling this out, and that just kind of stuck with me.
Yeah.
How can anyone believe that it's good faith when it's very clearly thinking of something and very clearly mocking the shit out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a headshot. This is a dunk. For sure. And I think the problem with this, if we actually look at the rest of the Twitter, he comes back. I think it's a he. I'm not sure. I don't know this person at all, but this individual comes back and apologizes. And so, I would like to reach out to the authors of SCP-6747. I apologize for how mean-spirited my actions came off as, despite not having intended them to be read as such. And it was a little complicated because Morhadow is a staff member on the ES. So, on the one hand, I think that if you're going to translate an entire article and, and basically a thesis work of criticism by a Wiki.dot user and critic by the name of Kenneth Vogel as well, if you're going to translate all of that, which is a lot of work, I think by that point you should probably have enough, confidence in your position to understand what it's probably not going to be taken very well. I don't think you get through the whole thing without understanding that, this is going to be not well received. And so, when you get to this point, I understand you have to do damage control, at this point when it doesn't go the way that you hope it would. There's some people who really applauded this as well. So, but he comes out and apologizes for it. And of course, if you look at the actual comments, the replies from, let's say Placeholder, McDoctorate, or some of the other Admonition Hub authors, they don't care that he apologized. That's the only issue about apologizing in this context, is that it's not going to be actually well received. It's essentially an indication of weakness, and they will smell blood in the water, is essentially what that comes down to. And that's exactly what we see here. When they want you to apologize so they can make you feel worse, it's not like an apology will actually be received.
Yeah. Something about ES that, about their culture in general, how they relate to the English community. The Spanish users are outwardly very apologetic, very nice, very light. But internally, like when you actually read how they talk, they are caustic, is I think the only word that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that because I'm a part of it, I take part in this sort of criticism.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much everyone in ES acknowledges that Adao did nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Did not have apologized, but
yeah, I think it was a mistake for him to apologize. For sure.
Yeah, but it was kind of necessary because ES is already kind of in jeopardy from
Yep.
from the incident from a few months ago. So
Correct. Yep.
they need to be in good terms.
Yeah.
At any cost.
Yeah, and so that was a mature thing for him to do. I think he understood that it was going to torpedo, a lot of his credibility. It kind of reminded me of what you were talking about earlier with, you make one wrong move and, you're out, buddy. But yeah, so bringing it back just to conclude about this 6969J. I mean, like I said, look, obviously, clearly in the Admonition Hub, I can't tell what's making fun of it. You have this view accessibility mode up here that's just giant. I mean, I don't understand. Is this a satire? I don't understand. And then the whole thing, of course, these capitalized, very vivid colors, all cap. The very characteristic div, boxes and things like this. So, I can't tell if this is actually satire or not. And but one thing I can tell is that there's actually two of these articles are J versions of the author's own article. Does that make sense? So 6969, Yossi did a joke about it, and then 6269, this person wrote and then did a joke about theirs. So I mean, I don't know, it just seems like there's maybe a slightly ulterior motive going on with that. And then moving on.
That's least of our concerns, really.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, not too surprised. This is actually another J that was posted on April 1st, and it's actually another parody of another article. It's not the author's own article, which is nice. The initial author of this is Shaggy. This is SCP Uwu, where the W is silent, and it's a parody of DJ Cactus's SCP-3930, which is, I think, Pattern Screamers. But this one's a little interesting in that it plays with the original text with some funny interjections and then kind of goes all out. And it seems like it just completely loses its mind as you go for it. There's like all this capital yelling text. And then
the point of the article is that you can add that sort of nonsense shit to it. And
absolutely. Yeah, so
I don't get it. What's the joke there? It's just random shit.
It's a great point. If you look in the comments, Shaggy calls this a collaborative effort. Sorry, I'm quoting, a collaborative home for everyone to shitpost whatever they'd like as an exercise to see how audacious it can get before it gets deleted. So you're right. This is another social experiment article. And we saw that with Cot J, which is basically the defense when it gets called out in the context of what should be, an effortful medium. It always backs up into, this is a social experiment. Let's see how we can do. So I don't know how much mileage that gets. I think.
Oh,
go ahead.
Dreadlocks was extremely fucking angry at Cot J. So
yes,
this is a jab. Not surprising at all.
No. So I think there are moments of this that's pretty good. Like the handful of capital passages, I think, are better parodies of DJ Cactus on Twitter than parodies of his SCP-3930. But whatever, everybody's adding to this. Milk, of course, is mentioned. So it's kind of hit or miss. The content of it makes more sense once you understand that it's a collaborative premise. There are a couple things in here that I thought was pretty good, but yeah, it's I think the rating for it is pretty appropriate. It's like 20 plus 23. So, and then another article. This is another one of the J's that we had posted on April Fools, and this is SCP More Gun. And as you can see, this is also in the admonition style. So I don't know. I can't get if this is supposed to be a satire. If everyone decided to satirize the admonition hub CSS on April Fools, or if it's just caught on. I can't tell. It's not clear enough if this is a satire. So to me, it just kind of feels like they're just trying to use it because they actually like it. Otherwise, I think the satire would come through a little more clearly. And then another Fish J. This is 6395.
Saria made a post on Sponge.
Oh, hey, we also have SariaStuff. Thanks for joining. So let's catch up here. Sorry. So Jane Bond mentions the Magnus Archives. It's basically a Confic organization. This is nothing I've heard of. I hope it doesn't have anything to do with the author by the same name of the SCP Wiki, but we'll see. And SariaStuff, thanks for joining us in the chat here, and asks, do you think these social experiment SCPs, similar to Cot J, can ever be good? Personally, obviously it's a highly subjective question. I want to say that they could be good. I think that there's enough creative minds and intelligence on something like the SCP Wiki on the whole for someone to find a good way to do it. I think that SCP-J was a good example of that. In a way that didn't have to back into the social experiment excuse, which I think is just that. I think it's an excuse. But yeah, I don't know. I think every time we've seen the phrase social experiment pop up in the context of an article or an action, on the SCP Wiki, it usually doesn't end well at all.
Yeah, my take on it is just fuck off. We don't need this, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
It never ends well. Never,
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
Nothing is ever gained from it. It always ends up drama. It's like 2 hours of shit posting and then 10 hours of stress. Not worth it.
Yeah, and once again, if we look at the ripples that have come off of Cot J or something like the Great Seal, it's just amazing. And Pixelated Harmony is in the chat. Thanks for joining us. And she asks, is the point even to be good? And once again, if you ask the people who are benefiting from this kind of social experimentation, I mean, obviously, they get what they're going for. They're trying to make a splash. And from the point of upvotes, I guess I don't think the point is to be good in the sense of writing. I think it's good in the sense of memetics that are catching and catch on. And I think that's really the larger point that Almarduk is saying as well, which is just that, memetics are fine. Memes are great, but a writing site that has apparently high standards is probably the last place we should be seeing these things really being excused and even praised. All right. And just to round out the J's, I mean, SCP 6000 was changed. Router House changed that for the day just to feature some not safe for work images. And just wanted to point out that was kind of in the tradition of something that Pepper's Ghost had done with SCP 4000, and this was for April Fools on 2019, where parts of the on the screen here, parts of the article was replaced with like furry pictures and stuff. So obviously well done. But I wonder if Rounder was doing that. Otherwise, we have to conclude that he just wanted to add images that his work inspired that he, for some reason, likes.
I think actually Jaggy might have done the same with what's 5999.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's kind of an infamous image because back when that article first dropped, the joke was that there was porn of that article before we actually know what the fuck it was.
Wow. Record.
When we first saw that image, that NSFW drawing, it did not know anything about 5999. It didn't even know what Link to Swan's proposal was. So
sounds like
an
inside job
for a while, and
no pun, inside job. But yeah, I mean, and then SariaStuff comments, the not safe for work images are the absolute bane of my existence. Sometimes I feel like the only reason they made the 18 plus rule is so that they can do this stuff without being held accountable or whatever. Yeah, it's sort of a way to wash your hands of it. This goes back to the age raise, which of course goes back to the scandal, the sexual scandal involving Gabriel Jade and Escobar and Dr. Bright, Admin Bright as well. But yeah, so basically that was an effort to just wash their hands of the situation so that they could not be culpable. So, not safe for work images, I mean, the main demographic is, is horny teens. I mean, let's face it, that's the main demographic of SCP. So, I mean, kids are going to be kids. I'm happy they put the adult theme on there just to let you know. I mean, not that anybody cares, I mean, that has never worked once, right? I mean, who's said, oh, I got to get out of here? Nobody. And I think that the authors need to recognize that. And I think that, we shouldn't be doing that, honestly. But that's just me. I'm an old man. I got 2 kids. So whatever. All right. And then chapter 2 for the April Fools for SCP Wiki is that not only were there not only were there actual articles and J's that were posted that were basically all just shit posting, but there were 16 tales posted on April Fools. Of those, 1 was an art page, 1 was a singular art piece, which was commissioned for Yasi Posse's SCP-6969J, no less. And then 1 was a non-J, again, with adult content. That was a tale about a whorehouse. The rest of the jokes on the SCP Wiki on April 1st, that is to say, the other, call it 13, were joke tales, with the majority of them being coordinated dumps of the fish team themed shit posts. And all of these kind of started with the same title. So they start with the word I, and then they have a comma, and then they ... So for example, Guy, who's a staff member, posted I am late, which is simply one sentence, which is basically just saying, I have spent the past year trapped in an acid bath that has plus 21. IHP actually participated in this, Speak of the Devil. Also posted a tale, Director Schwartz of the Shark Punching Center. And basically, this is just a collective shit posting effort for people just to post a bunch of tales about fish. Machin posted one, I want you all to stop, which consists of two sentences that say simply, please stop, it's not funny anymore, please, I'm fucking begging you, which had a plus 13 rating. Cathar Districts posted, a polar bear covering my nose in a snowstorm, which has no content. It's white, obviously. So that's a Neo-lolFoundation joke, in my opinion, for sure. SariaStuff says that April Fools this year sucked. Yeah. Yeah. It was, like I said, it was either the most coordinated and comprehensive and most impressive front of April Fool's posting yet, or it was just totally embarrassing. And Almarduk thinks it's both. I kind of agree. But yeah, the other tales were official guides from the staff, the fishing team. There were a few really, really good, I think, efforts. There's a remake of SCP-173, but with every word cross-linked, which is very effortful. It's actually excellent work. I thought that was a great job. There's a parody of SCP's standards for itself called That Face When SCP Sad Face, which was pretty funny. I don't know if you've read that, but encourage that one. And then, of course, there was the conglomerate group effort of authors to satirize the backrooms as the bathrooms. And, that comes off a little bit tasteless. And, there's really kind of a stark, awkward silence with that permanent message on the Backrooms Wiki front page, which says, go to the SCP Wiki. We owe a lot to the SCP Wiki. Check it out if you have a chance. So this kind of, I don't know, it kind of gives the vibe of unrequited love, like a fan who thought that a one-night stand with their favorite lead singer was going to be lasting. But, never meet your heroes. I guess that's what they think of you guys. So, I mean, in the comments,
article because it's so clearly mean-spirited, and
yes, yeah,
of the authors, they just deny that.
Yeah,
they can't deny that, but right anyway, and it's actually fucking hilarious because some of the authors of the article are also authors of 6747, which was authorized by Morhadow.
Mm-hmm.
And they complain they have been bullied because of writing the article. And it stretches the suspension of disbelief that anyone could think that. And then turn to making a mean-spirited joke about another side, and don't get it. What kind of mental gymnastic do you have to do to justify that to yourself?
Yeah, I mean, when you really try to analyze it, and then SariaStuff says it very well. So I'll read what they post. SariaStuff says in the chat, bathrooms is a sore spot considering Disc J. I think I told this to Harmony at some point. It's not okay to satirize SCP staff, but it is the backrooms staff. It's totally okay. So that's a great way to say it, because when you get down to what are the principles behind this, what are the ideals, what are the moral foundations of why this is okay and why that's okay or not okay, there's really no rhyme or reason to it. What it kind of breaks down to, and we've seen this all the time, you can actually go back and look at individual people who voted, for example, to strip someone like Harmony of their articles, and then vote, in later votes that have nothing to do with Harmony, completely contradict themselves, where they try to laud author sovereignty. And so when it comes down to this, we see that it really is all pivoting on whether you're in group or out group, which if you want to translate that to a more curt way of saying it, it's that there's no morals here. There's no ideals. There's no principles. Someone famous who I can't recall once said that, if principles have an expiration date, they're not principles. And so if we see them just completely flip-flop in contexts from, if you criticize us with SCP Disc J, we're going to delete it immediately or have a big discussion about it, and you're transphobic, somehow. I still don't get how that's transphobic. And then if we criticize the back rooms, all we have to do is just hand wave it and say, "Oh, it's not meant to be mean." So that sort of contradictory sort of treatment, it's asymmetrical treatment. It's differentiated treatment. So that's just what we can expect from people who are more concerned with, like, their social status and their social pressures than they are with, more laudable things like principles. And then we covered now just everything that was on the SCP Wiki on April Fools. But what we didn't cover, and won't, thank God, is all the things that were deleted. So if you look on the screen, I have this up. This is just the deletions from April 1st. All of these, most all of these have something to do with the jokes. So there's fish jokes. There's more of the I, dot tail series. This goes on and on and on. This is another tale about a fish under a cat's knife. Morning, Mr. Fister. I am the April Fool. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. There are actually, if you look at the very bottom of the screen here, there's a tale that was called Admonition, which clearly is a jab at admonition, but I didn't get a chance to see that one before it got deleted. I'm sure they would have made a fuss about that one too. So that was funny to see as well, but I didn't catch that one. I would have archived it for sure. And then things like this, like a tale called I Fishish, written by Fishish, and the only thing on it was, "This will make you feel like a fish." Luckily, these things were deleted, but I'm not so sure why. When you look at the other ones that survived, they don't seem to have a lot differentiating them, basically. But
I think this April Fool's gives a new definition to the expression "joke is on you."
yeah, I think that's a good way to say it. The joke really is not. We're not laughing with SCP this year, are we? And that leads us into the last leg of this cast, a special 2-hour cast. Thank you for everyone for joining us. But so this is a tweet that popped up on the screen here. This is by someone, I'm not sure who this is, but it's someone who's kind of outside of the actual SCP Wiki. And this is what they have to say. I'm going to quote this. This is on April 1st. Observing the SCP author circle as an outsider and seeing someone say, "Lol, screw positivity, let's subtweet each other." And then a few days later say, "Okay, there's too much toxicity and discourse, so let's say nice shit about each other instead." And the tweeter asks, "Are you guys okay?" And so if you scroll down, you actually get a bunch of interesting replies from SCP authors. Randerhouse waves it off like it's a joke, of course. A little more earnest of individuals will say things like Calibold says he's not sure. And I think it's Optimistic Lucio actually comes by and says, no, no one is fine here. The people who are healthy here can be counted on one hand. So that was pretty funny. I don't know exactly what everybody was so subtweeting each other about. I'm glad I don't know. I don't really care. But it was interesting to see the other side of the coin. So this is author Ralston, who has this to say on April 1st. "Because the last couple of days on the wiki have been absolutely filled with stupid toxicity and annoyingly insulting each other, let's try some more positive things for a change. Reply to this post and I'll say one nice thing about you." So everybody decided to be nice to one another. Even communism will win. Even Akumio, I got in on this. So this is a thread, interesting thread by.
That's a novelty.
Yeah, so definitely check that out. Scroll down. Their Twitter is fun to see anyway. You have things like this. It's just funny to see that someone like Communism Will Win, Akumioi, who's sort of running parallel to the pack, like we are, has some interesting things to say that I think we all like and agree with, like this image here where the guru
it's weird to see them being nice because their entire thing is being like acid personified.
Yeah, exactly. So this was fun to see. It's interesting to see what they say about all these different people. So I would recommend that just for a fun little read. And so it's not clear exactly what got everybody in such a worked up condition to where they had to have mandatory positivity complement time. But I'm guessing that this had something to do with it. Once again, so on the screen now, we finally get to SCP-001J, otherwise known as Plague's Proposal, Plague PJP, the author, and it's also known as the Great Seal. And so this is a cute picture of a seal. And we may want to go ahead and upvote. If we upvote cute images of animals, like cats, then this article has already achieved that. And then it's actually an article too, so it overachieves. So certainly this should be upvoted. But actually we see, the rating about 68 and the comments are at about 75. So this is the equivalent of being ratioed on the SCP Wiki.
Oh, it's good because it has more comments than upvotes.
Yes, exactly. So that's how you know you won. You won the game. And
so the title is a very complicated in-joke. The Great Seal obviously refers to seal that is great in that animal that is outstanding, but it's an oblique reference to Cerastes' attempt at a 001 proposal that got absolutely fucking blasted by the drama we have alluded to before, which was also titled The Great Seal. And the actual joke of this article on the contents, which are kind of irrelevant, is that it does not give proper credit to its critiquers, and it's not very funny. The article itself, it's kind of funny, but the point of the article is not very funny.
Yeah.
Which, surprisingly, a lot of people seem to agree with that.
Yeah, really.
With how taste this is.
Yeah, really controversial. The thing about this is that, you mentioned this earlier, Alma, which is where you have these sort of hit pieces come out. And we've seen that in the past. We've seen that in the past directed at actual individuals. SCP-J, Disc J sort of did that as a group. And even SCP Disc J had to do with the Cerastes incident as well. And so, once again, I think it's very, very important to understand, why the Cerastes incident was a deal. So we have a Containment Fiction Wiki article about it that really goes into just an exhaustive amount of detail, probably too much. But it just continues. These ripples just continue to just perforate the whole wiki. We did the first episode of this podcast on the Cerastes incident, and I think it's a really, really good synopsis of what happened. And so it's just very, very important to understand, I think, the details of this situation, because that's really what we're seeing, not only in things like this, but with the whole charter rewrite that's happening with the staff. It doesn't really make sense unless you understand the Cerastes incident. So getting into this...
And I feel so bad for Cerastes.
I do too. I noticed that Cerastes kind of dabbled back in the last year or so. I remember seeing Cerastes make a comment on 05, and I was kind of like, oh my gosh, there's Cerastes. I thought that maybe they ran away. But yeah, certainly no one has any more reason to be upset about anything than Cerastes, because if you're Cerastes, basically someone like Dexanote, someone like Dr. Magnus, these are, the big dogs of the wiki, the staff. They basically tried to assassinate you. I mean, they shot a bullet at you, and it missed twice. And they tried desperately to weaponize the rest of the crowd to basically just rip Cerastes apart, in the street. And it didn't work. And so these people have yet to face any sort of reckoning for this. So if you're Cerastes, obviously, I would be a little irritated at everything. I don't know if they feel that way. I don't know if they go that far. Maybe they don't care. But it certainly had an effect on the actual SCP Wiki, because we are Sans 1 SCP-001 proposal. Cerastes, of course, wrote that. It was also called the Great Seal. And we don't have that now because that was sunk by this attempted assassination. So it's really an episode of the staff getting in the way. Another example of the staff getting in the way of the actual content.
And one has to wonder whatever the hell happened in the backstage as a result of this article, because IHP and CyberSquid, as we have quit as a result of this article.
Yeah. And
IHP obviously has been under a lot of stress. Apparently, they have made this very apparent. I'm not. It's not gossip what I'm saying. They are very open about how stressful this is. Because of Twitter, because of Rounder House's 6,000 joke, because of the Great Seal, and I think that was like the last drop in cup that had been filling since at least 2018.
Yeah. IHP. I mean, what can you say? I mean, if you look at the Wikidot art profile here, they've been a Wikidot user since December 2011, and has really truly been a very prolific, very reliable author. I don't always enjoy IHP's article. I think it's kind of hit or miss. Something like their 4,000 contest entry, which is Future Imperfect, I thought was very good on the whole. And then something like their 5,000 entry, which was, I think, called The Death of the Author, actually was just an absolute mess, in my opinion. But I think, IHP is one of those individuals who, when me and Harmony were talking about just, kind of putting out some awards just for fun, came up for a Lifetime Achievement Award just in containment fiction. I mean, because this person is so involved, so dedicated to the SCP Wiki. And I think you're right. Something has happened in the last while that is just, it's been the straw that broke the back. So if you look at the Plague PJP proposal comments, you can actually see CyberSquid and IHP. And so CyberSquids is really straightforward. They say, I'm going to quote CyberSquid here. This is in response to the Great Seal, which, by the way, just let me point this out, is in my opinion, a perfectly fair satire of something that the staff have delayed just to the utter detriment of their reputation for over a year and a half, and is a problem of their own making. So if one of the users of the site, I think Plague BJP, I think is junior staff, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong about that. But if someone wants to come along and, satirize it in the only way that the SCP Wiki offers, satirizing it in this format, in this way, you can't do that anywhere else. So, making this joke, which I don't know exactly how pointed it was to this, but it seems as though even the context bringing it up was enough. So, for what it's worth, I'm not sure why we have such defensive behavior for, essentially staff members like Dexanote who have admitted, that this was a horrible injustice. It's not like there's some controversy over that. There's not. These individuals understand very well that they've done something wrong, and everyone understands well enough that no one's received any reckoning for that. So if this is the reckoning, I think it's really small potatoes compared to what actually should be happening to some of these individuals who were involved in this Cerastes incident. But yeah, so I mean, this goes back. IHP, you can see him kind of boiling over actually during the incident. I remember witnessing IHP getting angry over calling it the Cerastes incident, and IHP was a proponent of calling it just the events of November 2020 and depersonalizing it there. Whereas, in my opinion, we call it the Cerastes incident not only because that memetically is what it was to begin with, but because that brings along with it this idea that Cerastes was wronged. That's what this is about, and the larger context of Cerastes just being sort of a small fry, in a way, having absolutely zero leverage and zero fair treatment in the system. So, if you ask me, this is a mild form of retribution. This is a mild reckoning.
You said you were going to quote the post, and then you
totally tangent there. So this is CyberSquid. So CyberSquid says, "Thanks, I guess, for making me realize that I have become completely disillusioned with the wiki. I'm glad this is the kind of thing y'all think is good, and I'm glad y'all are enjoying this. But yeah, I'm done here. And so, in response to that plague, the author said, I mean, if that's what you got out of it, I'm glad that it helped in that regard. And then they modified their statement a little bit. And then it turns out that individual actually quit. So this shows up the next day on 05. This is a non-disciplinary record on 05. And I'm quoting this too. On April 1st, site member CyberSquid engaged in a violation of Rule 0 and the site criticism policy in a comment posted to a joke article published by another user for April Fool's Day, yada, yada, yada. As of note, immediately after this was posted, the user proceeded to delete all articles and delete verse site membership. Given this, should CyberSquid return to the wiki in the future, I believe the disciplinary team should look into some form of action against the comment, and especially given actions in the past, which I'm not too keen on. But yeah, so they deleted all of the articles that this author had on the site, and the site membership is gone too. So this was pretty definitive.
Like, Jesus Christ. CyberSquid, for context, is one of the most prolific critiquers on the site, and was a very active staff member, and was known for being very open to criticize both articles and community things.
I did not know that. It sounds like they lost a...
Their departure is... it's a big deal.
Huh, what an asset. Well, I didn't know that about CyberSquid. That's interesting to learn. I might want to go back and read some comments of theirs. But
I think that should be noted about HighHP is that HighHP quit the wiki before, and the fact that they didn't delete their articles seems to me that they might turn in the future.
Yeah.
At least seems that's going to happen.
If we look at the author page, this was updated actually on the 8th, which was yesterday. So they're still kind of around, but the author page is all it is a living will. Here it is on the screen. And it says, in the event I judge my mental health to degrade to a degree that I might start harming my works, or yada, yada, I hereby give the following people privileges on my articles, whatever. And I think if you actually go to their actual Wikidot page, their tagline, it used to say goodbye. I think it sounds like looks like they've removed that, but
it only says that when you open the user comment or through the history instead of looking at the profile directly.
Oh,
interesting. So the small pop-up that shows up when you click a profile in another page.
Let's see. Yeah, there it is. About says goodbye. Good call. Yeah, and as we've been talking about, this is I had it up on the screen earlier, but there was a interviewing icons interview by WhiteGuard for IHP. IHP wrote, I think, a couple of 001s. One was a rewrite of Harmony's Keter duty, which I didn't appreciate very much. Didn't think it was very good, but they also wrote a pataphysical one, I think, in 2018, which was I thought was fair. I thought it was a very good attempt. So, yeah. So let's end this by
exactly
3. My goodness.
Yes, there's a story of your life, might be, which I'm looking at right now.
That's great.
There's the rewrite of Care Duty, and a new one with someone else. I'm going to look at them.
Yeah, let me know. That'd be nice. In the meantime, we'll just kind of take a little peek into the comments that were left on this Great Seal J to give us a little more insight as to why this a really celebrated author has left. And so the initial comment left on the comment section to this Plagues proposal says this by IHP. The only difference between this and SCP Disc J is that SCP Disc J's author deleted their account after posting it. And there are a few more revisions to this. There's an edit that says, upside, if anyone ever asks why I have so little faith in the new crop who say they want to reform the site, now I have something to point to. And then eventually, ultimately, this comment was edited to just say disregard. So it's interesting to see because IHP really is talking about Rounder House. He's talking about the yurt. He's talking about this new generation of author activists who are sort of helmed by DJ Cactus in a way, who've taken a very sharp turn. I'm thinking of people like Guy, Gremlin Group, Rounder House, people of that sort of social clique who want to come in and change things as they stand in opposition to a figurehead like Moose, something like that. And we do have an article on the magazine coming out where Harmony is talking about that. Okay, so you got Keter Duty, you got Pikmin Blank Proposal, which is I think the newest. That's with Harry Blank. I haven't read that one.
That's the frontispiece.
Okay, I haven't read that yet. I'll say, and then IHP Proposal seems like the one that's kind of pataphysical. Yeah, from a while ago, which I thought was clever. Pataphysics obviously is touchy, but I think he did a good job with that. So, just looking once again at the comments, we can see a little why. In response to this initial comment from IHP, the author says, "So your vote is based on the content of the article or your opinion about me as a staff member and another deleted article," which is a good point because apparently you're supposed to be voting just on the content. And then another comment that was blanked says that IHP Disc J was transphobic, which I think by now is as a meme, although here it's unironically posted. And we actually see Kinch come back here. Kinch says it's sort of shitty to compare this article to SCP Disc J, disrespectful and vile even, but what do I know? Anyway, so I'm not sure. I was talking to Salt Blossom about this a couple days ago, maybe last week, and Salt Blossom said something interesting that was a little, sympathetic to IHP, which I thought was interesting and a good insight, which is, IHP obviously is very good friends with these old school staffers, having been around the wiki since 2011, and is probably getting very tired of just a tremendous amount of criticism coming these individuals' way. Now, once again, I'll argue that it's warranted, just given what happened, but it'd be a lot like people in this Discord feeling protective and defensive over people who might, let's say, constantly trash talk us as well. So I get it.
Well, HP is kind of disproportionately affected by this. I want to shift this as more of a not a criticism because the fairly serious issue that I have a lot of mental health issues. You can see that in practically every conversation they are just angry. They talk about it at length in their author page and in prior revisions of the author page, and one can only imagine how stressed they are. And an environment like this is absolutely not suitable for them. The fact that they quit is really the best for their health.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Like a genuine commentary, not a criticism.
I hear you. And I think honestly, they probably agree with you, the first one to agree with you. I think that back in the day, when I was writing under an alt on the wiki as, I think it was Minimal, another one that I deleted, it was the Hippo, who started a forum thread on the SCP Wiki asking, what's up with the trend of people just deleting their their author names, deleting their Wikidot accounts, and then leaving. And if I'm not mistaken, I think IHP showed up in that thread and talked about what you're saying. Talked about a little details of how it was and why it was that this was such a stressful place to write. I know Tufto did. I know that the Great Hippo did, and I know a couple others did. I'm pretty sure IHP was in there because, as you said, IHP has deleted their account before. They've come back, a couple of times, I think, at least once. So it's just a shame to me because you have someone who is a good author. I think anybody would be happy to have IHP, right? I mean, any community would be happy to have IHP. That's an asset, and it's just sad to see this context that makes it so difficult to write in. Does that make sense? I mean, part of it is personal, because other people can do it fine and not have the problems that are idiosyncratic to IHP. But there's some part of this is a commentary on the culture and the community that I think there's just so much clutter in the way of actually writing. It's just it can be sad to see sometimes.
I think it's a problem I have talked about before with some of my friends in CPS. Oh, there's echo.
Oh, there is?
I can hear myself.
Is that new?
Just right now.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I've changed anything on my end, but anyway, so this has been about 2 hours. Almarduk, what a wonderful conversation. It's so nice to have you. I guess we'll take this as a nice ending point, but we went extra long today, 2 hours, just because of the vibrancy of your participation. So really appreciate that. All right. Well, we will be back again next week, Saturday. We'll see what's going on in the space, and certainly hope that you'll join us that time as well. This will be up on the new Twitch after it is uploaded, and also, of course, on the Apple Podcast and Spotify as Confic Call-In. I want to thank you once again to all our participants, and a special thank you to Almarduk. Hope to see you back here sometime. Always a pleasure.
Thanks.
All right. Have a great weekend.